Hi, how's it going? So today's tour is going to be a little different in the fact that it's not a traditional sketchbook. Um, it's going to be all of my sketches, well not all of them, that would go on for hours, but a collection of my sketches that I've been sifting through over the last couple of days, due in part to the fact that I'm moving house very soon. And I wanted to maybe get rid of the things that didn't really mean anything to me and keep and store properly the ones that did. Now, that isn't me saying this is the best of my work from the last 10 years potentially. These are just some of the drawings that kind of mean something to me. Either they were done on a particular day of the year or a particular time in my life. But in that sense, they're kind of like photos, I suppose. But unlike photos, these 99% of the time are things just done from imagination, no references, very much sketches, very much doodles. And these are the typical things that I tend to doodle, or especially back then, before I was studying, before I was learning about perspective, doing any real work on anatomy or life drawing. Now, there's a few of those things in here, but it was all intuitive. Like this chap right here, there's. You could almost say that that was a life drawing, but he's just a random character. He just sort of plopped onto the page. And like I said, the same can be said for a lot of these. Now, experimenting with colour, experimenting with face shapes. There's a lot of that in here. It's very experimental. It's very loose. I used to get, when I first started posting things on Instagram and social media in general, I used to get comparisons to Egon Schiele, but funnily enough at the time I'd seen his work, but I didn't really know anything about him. I didn't know the name. But that only got me more interested in actually drawing the human figure a little bit more. And then, especially at that time when I was doing these pencil sketches, these sorts of things, that's when I really started to fall in love with drawing again. Now, I've been drawing since I was a child, but then I got into music when I was in my mid-teens, so I spent a lot of time on guitar and bass and learning, how to write music and play music. And drawing was still something that I did every now and again, but it did fall by the wayside. So, in a lot of ways, I feel like I am making up for lost time with a lot of these drawings. Especially now, more than ever, my rate of study. But it was all incredibly informed by the time that I spent learning and teaching myself how to play a musical instrument. I go about learning to draw the same kind of way that I would with that. And by that I mean, doing it for at least 15 minutes a day, organising my time in terms of what to study. But at this point, it wasn't necessarily like that. It was more me just falling in love with drawing again. Now, as I got more and more into drawing, like these are quite early ones, maybe 8 or 9 years old now. These are a little bit newer. But as I got more and more into it, I then went a little bit more abstract. I experimented with face shapes. Things became a lot less realistic. They became more abstract, as I said, or angry or emotional in some sense. Yeah, it was an experimental time. And it wasn't until I decided to properly write a comic book that is still in the works. But it wasn't until I decided to actually create a story in a world that I actually wanted to get better, to learn more about perspective, form, anatomy, clothing. So all of this was kind of a primer for what came around late 2019, and ever since then I've been working to get better in terms of the theory. So these are all drawings that predate that, really. I don't think there's anything in here that's younger than 2019. So these were done on a holiday. Again, these aren't necessarily the best things I've ever done, but they hold some sort of memory to me. These are very early character designs for my comic, Scrambled Eggs. Now things have changed a lot since then, the story's changed, but the characters mostly stayed similar. This was the first time I ever asked people to suggest things for me to draw, which is something that I do every now and again still. So each part of him was of this particular character was decided by someone else or suggested by someone else. The galaxy trumpet, the mafia mice, the whatever else. This one's a little bit more recent, so maybe I have lied a little bit. I feel like this is maybe last year, and this is when I really started to doodle again, because I'd spent so much time studying. It was again quite a freeing thing to then sort of doodle again, and I think these were maybe done in the same session. This is something I did from a walk, so it is kind of from a reference, although I added elements. Experimenting with toothbrushes and sponges. That was a fun time because I was really into sort of playing around with certain contrasts and filling things with either white or black. Something I desperately want to sort of do again. I need to practice my notans first, I think. So yeah, maybe these are from, again, maybe a couple of years ago now. Playing around with different pens, smudging things. It was a lot of fun. But I was definitely gaining confidence by this point because these are more recent. The fact that there's extra people in the scene, as well as the odd building or an animal. I was playing around with Tipex or whiteout. And then I would scan these in and colour them digitally. This was another tell me what to drawing. So someone asked for frogs, so I did some frogs and a Kermit. I remember being really happy with this. Again, this was without a reference. The fact that I could draw a figure and he looked like he was sat down. Now, it's obviously missing elements, it is just a sketch, but I remember being very happy with that. Another character from my comic who has changed a hell of a lot, but this is one of my original versions of the Scraggle. sort of an antagonist, a lovable antagonist. Again, this is probably 6 or 7 years old, and I had a couple of hours drawing these really weird, almost automatic drawing type figures. This was a concept for a album cover that I did. They ended up going with something a lot darker. Again, experimenting with brush pens, parallel pens, smudging things. That's all done with a parallel pen. Again, just a random sketch. I've been drawing a lot of skulls at the time, so I think that sort of fed into that a little bit. I remember being happy with these because they felt alive to me. Like they weren't stilted, they weren't very stiff in their form, in their figure, which is something that I'm always striving to better. This was done at a time, again, playing around with facial features. I didn't really know the underlying anatomy of facial features at the time, so there's a lot of odd choices, but at the time I was very into those odd choices. And I do look back on these drawings very fondly. I find them very characterful. It's definitely something that I want to incorporate back into my drawing now I know how certain things are meant to be, let's say. So yeah, I mean, a lot of them are very much of a muchness. There's the odd watercolour thing in here, as you've probably noticed. Just experimenting with colour a little bit. I think this was a cover design. So when I first got into the idea of doing a comic, I was going to do a few anthology and then maybe have some little moments of just solely illustration based, a 2-page thing. This was a concept for that. Some more doodles, more recent things, maybe just 2 years old or maybe even just a year old. I didn't realise. I mean, I only compiled this yesterday, but I can't really remember what's in it. I remember being incredibly happy with this. Even though it's littered with mistakes, the fact that I could draw this character and then have them fragment into, these getting ever smaller and different angles. And like I say, it's by no means perfect. But I remember being very happy with it. I remember liking this guy's face, which is one of the reasons I've kept it. I remember really liking this one as well. There's a lot of sorrow, a lot of anger and anguish in some of these older drawings. And I'm typically quite a happy person, but it seems to be that's my go-to thing when I was doodling at the time. I think I was getting more into looking at other artists' work for this thing. So in this case, Mike Mignola. Because that's something else that maybe I've brought up before, but drawing was always just something that I did. It wasn't something that I looked at other artists for. It was up until it wasn't until the last couple of years that I really looked at other artists' work and thought, well, I could learn something from them, actually find my tastes through looking at other people's art. But at the time that I drew this, as opposed to this is just me doodling, not thinking about other artists, as this is a little bit more Mignola based, let's say. It's another album cover. Another album cover that I did. That's what the band went with. So I think before I said there was another guy with like a deer antler thing with a phone. It was a bit more cartoony, and that's from the same project. Again, another surreal thing. So this is maybe 2016, 17. Some more character-based things. This is a little bit more recent. Some of these things that are more recent, I went in and coloured digitally. Again, I go through phases of doing that. That was another tell me what to draw thing, like a Kinky Pig, I think it was, or something like that. This was going to be a bit of world building. The idea of something out of place, so a boat in the middle of a forest. And again, I don't think I really used a reference. I might have done for the boat, but everything else. And you can tell, I mean, I don't think it's incredibly great, but I do like the idea. That's from that horror-based thing that I did. That's another character. A couple of tell me what to draw things. Some of which I have redrawn and plan to put on Redbubble or maybe get a few printed myself. Another tell me what to draw thing. This is another. For some reason, I decided that a giant chicken would be an interesting thing to have in a story, so that was. Maybe I'll revisit that at some point, but it never went further than that sketch. Some jellyfish made out of offal. Oh, that was the idea. A more recent character type thing. I remember this was something I was quite proud of. I felt like it had a good line weight to it, a good energy. But again, just a random thing. So once I finished that horror thing, that horror project, in which I got a few things printed, and I thought, well, if I do something every month, that might be quite fun. So this was going to follow on from that. I was going to do cryptids, mythical creatures, and things like that. So this is a Bigfoot and a mermaid. These are loosely based, or very much heavily based, to be honest, on my cat Bootsy. He's a black and white tuxedo cat. He's quite mischievous, and he's got a funny tail. For some reason, when he was a kitten, he lost a little bit of his tail, and I've to this day no idea how it happened. I ended up finding this small little nub under the fridge when I moved to where I currently am now, and he's fine. It didn't affect his tail any, he just lost a little bit of it, so that's why he's got that little detail. Another character sketch for a character called Nick, who doesn't have antlers anymore, but that's originally how he was sort of dreamt up after some random doodling one day. And yeah, they're from the same session. Again, more recent character studies, character portraits, playing around with certain concepts that Ashley Wood, someone else who I admire, I think I probably mentioned before, his loose line, his, it can look very messy, but it's incredibly, it's very impressive how messy it looks, but how hard it is to replicate, let's say. Expressionist. And it takes a lot of skill to, do some of those things. So, yeah, that's the first file. I've got 2 files. The other one I'm going to concentrate on next week. And yeah, I think we're going to leave it there. I'll try and not ramble too much at the very end. So if you enjoyed looking through my random doodles, please give this video a like. That would be very kind of you. And yeah, like I say, we'll leave it there. So as always, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next week. Toodaloo.